Welcome to the Deer Society podcast. Here's your host, Brian Lemke.
Yeah, this is who I am. Well, I'm a deer hunting man.
Well, hey guys, welcome back to the Deer Society podcast. I'm Brian Lemke, joined by JJ Dukart and special guest Ben Rising. We got some exciting stuff to talk about today. Going to be talking about different strategies, kind of in different areas across the country. We're going to cover some calling tactics, how we call, why we call, and just those different scenarios of why we're trying to paint the picture we're trying to paint. And also some tactics that go along with that. So scent control, just some different things and a bunch of different topics. So Ben, thanks for joining us, man.
Yeah, thanks. Trying to get out of this donut coma I'm in here. We just had some donuts delivered, and I'm like, oh.
The donuts were good. I don't know. We maybe should have left them for after the podcast because I think we're all kind of crashing. But good stuff to talk about today. So JJ, I'll kind of let you kick it off. What do you want to talk about?
Yeah, so yesterday we filmed a bunch of hunt breakdowns with Ben, and it was kind of interesting just seeing, as far as the communication aspect, calling, rattling, he has such different techniques as he travels, because he travels a lot, shoots booners in every state he goes to. So, yeah, it's just kind of interesting that when he does...
I'm sorry.
When he does deploy his tactics, so they're quite a bit different for each area, whether it's state or just more region, depending on, how the deer are reacting, time of the year. So maybe we just start breaking down some of the comments from yesterday. I know, in your home state, you said you weren't as aggressive when it comes to calling and rattling, which is the state of Ohio versus, you go to Kansas, and that seems to be your number one tactic for pulling in deer. So kind of just maybe high level, what are kind of some of your thoughts as you do travel, just general calling and rattling tactics? How do they differentiate from state to state?
Yeah. Well, like I said yesterday, Ohio seems to be anymore. I mean, granted, if the deer's in the right mood, it's not going to matter, but there's so many hunters in Ohio, and the parcels are getting smaller, and, the baiting is such a big factor. The deer get a lot of pressure. So the calling techniques in Ohio don't seem to work as good on the deer as it does in some places like Kansas. It works. I mean, and as you saw, I did rattle Roman in, but it's a lot of it's how you do it, I think. I think there's certain techniques to use as far as when to get really aggressive with it and when not to, when to just tickle the antlers, how to mimic the sounds of true deer, not just pick them out of your bag and start rattling. I think there's a system to it, and it's kind of what I've tried to develop, and really, like you said, as you travel from state to state, if you're, I've usually every year I get about 2 weeks, because of my job, but I get about 2 weeks that we try to get our out-of-state hunts in for the show. And so, I'm up against it, trying to fill those tags. And, calling has been that one thing in my arsenal that has probably killed more deer for me than anything,
So you think pressure is the biggest factor that plays into how deer react, or is it also the habitat? In Kansas, they don't have that big timber stuff like you do,
I think it's more... Well, I mean, there could be a lot of deer that react to calling in Ohio that people maybe never even knew they reacted because they didn't see them because of the big timber and cover. But, Kansas can have that too. But the deer in Kansas just seem more aggressive. They just seem to be a more aggressive type of whitetail. And I don't know if that's the case or not. Obviously, like rattling in Texas is well known that it works. Those bucks down there respond to rattling like crazy on those ranches, I guess. But in Ohio, it just seems more, it will work for sure. It's just, I don't think it works as well for deer to just respond to it easily, to come to you and be that curious or that aggressive about it. They've had more experiences with bad situations, maybe, being called in and winding somebody, or they're like, that don't sound right, or something. Just doesn't seem to be as effective for us in Ohio as it does some other places.
Do you think that it has to do with buck to doe ratios too? I know, like just Minnesota, Wisconsin, we have quite a few more does than bucks, and maybe if you get to Kansas, Texas, they're that 1-to-1 ratio. I don't know what Ohio is, but it seems like, you had a field full of does when you shot Roman, a couple bucks.
Yeah.
Do you think that plays into it?
Well,
Not
it
as many
could,
bucks
but I
fighting?
see the same in Kansas though. I see more does than I do bucks. There's the ratio's not even by any means. So I don't know. Like, again, I think it's catching them in the right mood. I think you can rattle a buck in early October, truthfully, anywhere. It's just how you do it and how you go about it. Like I've explained, one of my tactics is like if we're hunting a food source or something and we bump deer off of it, the second that we get settled, I'll tickle the antlers again to try to settle the deer down around like it was just like what bumped the other deer was maybe just, a couple bucks or staggered into the field and, spook some other deer off. Like they didn't really know what was going on. And it, eventually they come right back out, so, but I don't get super aggressive and, I just kind of tickle the antlers together, like 2 bucks feeding, bumping heads, doing the, the socialism type deal, just checking each other out and, just being young bucks.
Do you think, and I'm just kind of brainstorming here, but I hunted in Kansas last year and had the same kind of experience. I mean, deer were pretty receptive to calling, and they can be receptive up here in the Midwest too during certain times. Like I think you hit that late October window. Like there's a window of 5 days. I know here in Minnesota that it seems like deer are really responsive to calling, and that just goes to what kind of mood they're in, right? In Kansas, I wonder, and this is a question for you. It seemed like, some of the people that we were hunting with down there, they weren't building history with these deer, right? So their core ranges for these bucks was really, really big compared to up here, right? So like we build history with these deer, 2, 3, 4, 5 years old, we're seeing the same deer. Down there, they're not really doing that. It's new bucks every single year because they don't have as much cover that it seems like, at least the area that I was hunting, that are holding these deer year after year after year. Do you think that home range could have anything to do, or the difference in terrain could have anything to do with why or why not they're more responsive to calling?
It could. I mean, those deer in that kind of country definitely are more roamers, I believe. I notice even the stuff I hunt in Illinois, especially when the rut's on, I get more strange deer on my cameras than I do in Ohio. Typically in Ohio, the deer that I have come October are the deer I have all year, or, all fall into winter. Don't seem to pick up any stragglers much in the rut. I don't know why that is, just don't seem to. So that could be a reason, like as a deer's roaming and, going across a stretch of ground and you hit the antlers to him or whatever, and he may be more aggressive in that sense. I'm not real positive, but I do believe that any deer is callable just in the right situation and the right mindset.
I think when it comes down to it, and Mike, your dad is always a big advocate of this. There's a difference between calling and communicating. And, a lot of guys go out there and they pull their rattle, the black racks out of their bag, and they just bam, 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 smash them together, and they're calling, blind calling. And not saying that blind calling is a bad thing, but they're rattling to rattle. When I think to be successful in calling, you really have to paint the picture. You have to think about the picture that you're painting, and you have to communicate, because that's what you're doing. You're not trying to just make the deer hear you. You're trying to communicate with them. So Ben, I think you do a really good job. And we talked about it with the scissors hunt a little bit, like the whole time when you talked about that calling sequence, you're thinking, okay, what is this deer actually doing? Well, I think he's standing there doing this. And if he hears this, this is what he's thinking. And you're trying to paint that picture that way instead of just calling to call.
Yeah, absolutely. I will blind call at times, but I don't like to. When things are really slow and I'm trying to make something happen, I will eventually do that. But typically I like to, like your dad said, or, like Mike said, I like to communicate with the deer. I feel them out. I test them, see what their mood they're in. And then that determines how aggressive I'm going to get, or am I just going to lay off, period. Sometimes I just quit calling because I can tell he doesn't like it. And I don't want to run that deer out of there. I need to figure out a different way to kill him or catch him in a different mood a different day.
So JJ, like calling different times of the year, how do you know how to call, at different times of the year? Because obviously there's times where you barely want to make any noise at all. And there's times that, you want to smash them together a little harder. How do you know? How do you, dictate when it's time to do that and when it's not?
Well, I think I kind of err on the side of caution when it comes to calling, and it's probably more like Ben's style too, real light. You got to be in their wheelhouse, see what they're doing, kind of gauge the, time of the year, their mindset. I'm just thinking about two different scenarios where I've called in some deer. October 4th here in Minnesota was the earliest I've rattled in a buck and shot him. Real light sparring, like a couple grunts, real light sparring. Paint the picture of two young bucks, because there were young bucks out there sparring earlier in the evening. So super, they do it all the time. When they shed their velvet, they're starting to spar. So there's no reason.
They're doing it before they shed their velvet sometimes.
I have not heard that, but that'd be pretty cool to document.
Not so much like just getting after it, but I've watched them start to, as their horns are starting to harden, I've watched them, start to bang their heads together a little bit.
Yeah, that's interesting. But yeah, they're doing it year round, so why shouldn't we be able to replicate that in the right scenario and try to pull them in? So yeah, October 4th, that's the earliest I rattled in a buck, called in a buck, and then just looking back last year, late November with Skyscraper, called him in, which is some, again, real light doe estrus bleats. I knew he was in a bedding area, probably 80, 100 yards away in the wheelhouse. That was a blind calling scenario, but being so natural with my calls that I feel like even if he's not there, or if he doesn't, he's not going to not like what he hears and get scared from my communication. That's what I try to replicate pretty much every scenario throughout the whole season. But I have done some real loud, like bash battles in big timber when I don't know what's there. It's like first day in, hunting there for a few days or a week and just slamming to see what runs in, and had pretty good success, but it's not typically like a big target buck running in, it's just deer bucks in general that are all fired up because it's the pre-rut. So keep it natural. That's always been my big thing. And I been called in 4 bucks last year, you called in the 4 bucks you shot last year, but then we broke down an additional one, which also was a communication, that 215-inch buck that you shot a few years back. But you're calling in a lot of deer, and it seems like natural in their wheelhouse is kind of the name of the game for you.
It's kind of like same with like fishing, strike zone. I think bucks have a strike zone too. Some can be real far away if they're aggressive, like that deer in Kansas I killed last year. That sucker was 500 yards away. We was able to call him in.
And it was windy. Yeah.
Yeah, and so it was windy. He just was in that mood. He was ready to fight. Some deer they'd heard and acknowledged, but they wouldn't have come, So some you got to be in their wheelhouse. Like a few years ago, you guys did the breakdown on the King 8. That deer took me a while to get him to break, but finally he broke, and I had to make him think that he was missing out on something around the corner that he couldn't see. So by throwing your call directions and making it sound different, like, there's bucks over here pushing a doe around and he's missing the action. And finally he just couldn't take it and he came, and then he died.
Yeah, it's interesting, and we can look at the hunt for Titus too. Like you talked about that in a breakdown yesterday. That 215-inch deer. It's like the first time you saw him, you called him a little bit, you read his body language, you read the situation, and decided, okay, I'm going to stop calling now. You didn't push the envelope. I think so much of a part of calling is being able to see the deer, reading their body language, and then determining in that instant, okay, do you keep calling or do you push the envelope? And I think there's a lot of different variables there probably. But Ben, do you have any advice on, when you're reading a deer's body language, how do you know, okay, do we keep calling? Do we just stop calling? How do you
yeah, so like with that deer, like with Titus, when he was, he was following a doe, I grunted at him a few times just to see if I couldn't maybe upset him enough to make him leave that doe and come over to me to check me out. But he wagged his tail twice, he heard me every time, and he never skipped a beat. And he didn't even really stop and acknowledge. He just was walking, smelling her, and his mind was on her, I could tell. And I'm like, I'm not gonna mess this up or spook her, because she got nervous a little bit, like, oh, there's another buck. And I didn't want to boot her out of there and then him be gone forever. So I just backed off, said, let's just, which turned out to be the right move. And then we called him in the next day. So,
Another kind of cool scenario too, looking back at what we broke down yesterday, is that Kansas situation you had. So the first buck you did a lot of communication with. It was more of that calm, like real sensitive type. Was it a morning or evening?
Yeah, it was a morning.
A morning. And it took 15 minutes for him to commit. I mean, if you watch the raw footage, it's communication, standing there, standing scrape, licking. That took a long time, a lot of patience, but you communicated quite a bit. On the other hand, the next day or two, when you shot your buck, it was hard rattling. Still took him a long time to get there
because he was so far
distance,
away.
But he
responded immediate.
Yeah, so kind of walk through like a couple scenarios like that. Like, what's the difference? Why were you choosing those communication methods for those two different scenarios?
Well, so the first buck in the morning that, was being nonchalant, I think, again, he couldn't make up his mind what direction he wanted to go. He kept smelling the ground. So I think some does were in that area that morning. And he couldn't decide whether he wanted to go track those does off, or then come over towards me where I was trying to grunt, trying to bleed a little bit, make it sound like there was a doe over there that he should come see. He almost just couldn't make up his mind. And, and he wasn't in a super aggressive mood at that point. But towards the end of the calling sequence, or me messing with him for a while, because I wasn't bothering, I could tell I wasn't spooking him, so I kept on him. Like he'd show his interest, like he wanted to come, but then he's like, and then he'd go back to smelling where those does were. So I knew at that point, he's on the hook. I can keep working him. He wasn't like, getting, weird about it. So I stayed on him, trying to call to him, and then finally convinced him, with the black rack, that there was a buck over there, 2 bucks over there, and there was a doe over there. And so he better come check it out. Then he got aggressive. Then he came in, worked a scrape, and started to come towards us. But just, started to go around that tree, and then I hit that limb. So that one was out of sight.
It seems like, is it safe to say that that's kind of your strategy when it comes to calling, is you kind of start with the extinguisher, you start with some grunts or some bleats and then work into the black rack if you don't convince them with the extinguisher?
Typically, unless it's like dire situation and the deer's leaving fast, like I just see him and he's moving quick and getting out of there, then I got to get his attention quick. He's got to hear it, so then I'll hit the antlers quicker, to where they can hear it. And then I may slow down. It may not be it may be just stop and get him to stop, and then I can decide, do I grunt then, or do I tickle the antlers a little more now that he's listening? Because you also have to be careful of moving, because they're laser focused where that sound came from at that point. And I think a lot of people get busted by moving, trying to rattle.
Yeah, and I think you do a good job of concealing your movement and picking the right stands. You're cutting yourself into thick cedars. You're in blinds when you shot Roman, and just not giving him a big silhouetted visual to look at too. So you do a good job of that. But then kind of rolling in from communication into how you play the wind, how your scent control works, it kind of ties in with the communication. You got to have that in the back of your mind too. Deer wanting to circle downwind, how are they reacting? How on edge are they? Like, what kind of tactics do you typically have when you're setting a stand or picking a location to, begin the hunt and put yourself in a position to call and rattle deer in?
Yeah, I just basically, I think about stand position. I want to be if I'm going to just hang a stand knowing basically that this is going to be a calling position, or I'm trying to observe deer from a distance and then call to them, which I do a lot in Kansas. I try to set my stand up where I can access it to where I'm laying my track where I don't think the deer are going to come from as much as possible. Maybe make it harder for them to get downwind of me. But then, your scent control has to come into that play. You're not always going to 100% full a deer's nose. There's times you can. But even with my scent regiment, there's times I get busted and there's times I don't, so it's just hard to really say, but what's going to work. And, one thing I have noticed, wet days are the toughest days to beat a deer. Do you agree?
Well, I was even going to mention that on the last podcast, is just throughout the season, the moisture level gets lower and lower and lower. So the fall is a lot drier in general than early season.
Yeah.
So that has to affect communication too, along with, rain or dry spells.
I agree. And so, like you'll notice a deer will lick his nose before a lot of times to smell, like especially during the rut. They wet their nose nostrils up. I mean, if you do it, lick your finger and, wet the inside of your nose a little bit, you'll be amazed at the difference. I've tried it. I'm like, but it's crazy. Like I've literally, and I have a good sniffer. And I had a really good sniffer before I got COVID. But then I got COVID for a little bit and got over it. But I did lose my taste and smell for, I lost my taste for about 7 days. I want to go shoot myself. But it took my sniffer a little while to come back, and it's still not like it was. But I used to literally be able to smell deer. Like I could be scouting or walking, and I could smell them. And I can now still, but not like I could. But you wet your nostrils a little bit like that, it's just amazing the difference it makes. And so I know that's why deer do it. So wet days are really tough days to beat a big deer. Like if you're just solely relying on your own scent regiment. So that's why I'm big about, like cover scent, like using some Black Widow deer urine or like doe matriarch that they make. And I've tried others, and I'm not just like trying to plug Black Widow, but I've tried other deer urines over the years, and they're stale or they've never worked for me. So for a long time, I never was interested in it. I got away from scent completely. And then a guy that was on our team when I first started hooked me up with Janice and Andy from Black Widow. And he said, you need to try these. He says, they're really good stuff. And so I did. And it totally changed how I felt about deer scent. And I started to then become a student of it because I liked it so much. And it turned me into hunting scrapes more because I felt like I could rely on the lures. And, it's not like you're just going to dump it out and a big buck's going to come run. That's not it. But I started to learn about scrapes more myself. Like, why are they using those scrapes and how are they using them? So now I become really good at that and teaching people that. But with that scent, like a lot of times I'll just spray that in the air. If I know deer are starting to get downwind of me, I'll just keep that bottle in my pocket and I'll just, and just kind of, and then you can see them catch it. The second they hit it, they're like, they stop, and then they'll either get curious or they'll just calm down and move on their way. So, I've tried it just sitting there not doing that, and the deer start to get edgy, start like they know something's not right, but then you spray that in the air, then then it calms them down. It's just weird how it works. Just like the hunt splits, where that doe was, those does were coming down the hill behind me. They couldn't quite get me, but they knew something wasn't right. So then I started spraying the lure, and if that wouldn't have happened, I never would have killed that deer that night because those deer would have ruined everything, But so I think it's a combination. If you got to be really good with your own scent control because you can use all the cover scent you want, but if you still smell like Calvin Klein, you're not going to get anywhere.
Yeah, and if you've had the privilege of watching all Ben's raw footage, you get to see him take a lot of phase baths out there, putting a lot of lotion on. We kind of joke about that one, and then constantly spraying that cover scent too while deer are reacting. Like big bucks are within camera sight.
Oh yeah,
and you're out there just spraying. But you got to remember too, wherever that urine is going, that's where your human odor is going too. So you got to remove the human odor, which you do well, and then you're putting that cover scent out. So they're working together. If you have dander, basically it's the same wind channel, the same thermal, the same whatever is going on there. So you do a good job of canceling the human and then covering with the
the deer. Like the thermals, we talk about that, like hunting certain areas at certain times of day, like you're rising and falling thermals. In the mornings, your thermals are rising, because the pressure is rising in the air, so you can hunt bottoms easier. But with that system that I do, like, I killed splits that night. I killed him in a bottom and in the evening. But that's the only way I was going to kill that deer. Like, I knew it. Like, I had to do it. And again, it's like going back to the earlier podcast where you talk about like when to make those moves, when to be aggressive. Well, that was one of those moves. Like I knew it was the first time I killed him first sit, but I knew my first sit had to be aggressive or I wasn't going to get that deer, so I relied on my scent control with the phase and, relied on the Black Widow and my stand position and that scrape. Like I knew that was his scrape. And so if nobody's ever watched that hunt, you need to watch it, whitetail edge, go to splits. Cause that's a good hunt explaining all that.
Yeah. And I like I said, I joke about the lotion quite a bit, but it obviously does really work. And you and Mike are the two biggest advocates of using that lotion, the phase lotion, but kind of walk through, you were telling us yesterday why you do that out in the field. I don't do that. Maybe I should start bringing the lotion, but I go heavy on the field foam out there. But why is the lotion, the phase lotion in your backpack like all the time?
Well, so like, when I get into the stand, like if we've had any kind of a walk or you kind of get a little warmed up, obviously I use the phase foam, that's the field foam. Put it in my hair, on my skin. But what I notice about the foam, it's basically kind of eliminating or, trying to stall that scent, the human scent. But it dries up,
Evaporates, yeah.
Evaporates and, does its job. But then your skin goes back to normal. So if you sit there for an hour or so, your skin starts to, you could flake it again, and that little bit of dander or any of that, I feel like the lotion is like spraying Flex Seal all over my body, like Phil Swift with Flex Seal here, it just feels like you're putting a coating on and that keeps you, I don't know. Maybe it's a mental thing for me, but it feels like it works for me. I put it on my face. I do it everywhere. And I'd never use lotion any other time of year, but come hunting season, I'm soft as a baby's rear end.
Yeah, that's kind of me too. I don't use lotion basically the entire year, but I do the kind of the reverse. The last thing I put on before I leave the house or the truck or whatever is the lotion. Then I do this foam in the tree, but it makes a bunch of sense. I might test
and I'll do the lotion.
backwards.
I'll do the lotion, my private parts and stuff that I can't get too much when I'm hunting. But when you walk, you're steaming up those hot spots, those hot spots, they get warm. So I feel like then when you use the foam, you've canceled out the lotion. You've just wiped it off your skin because that's what it does. So then that's why I reapply the lotion because I feel like that's what I need that layer, that last layer to complete the system.
The final layer of defense.
Yeah, this layer of defense to complete that system. Humans are mammals, and, all beings have a scent of some sort or another. So, like, I think people take, for instance, they don't understand that we smell so different to a deer. And, like, deer communicate through scent. Dogs communicate through scent, sniffing each other's butts. Well, deer smell each other's scrapes, their hocks. They know each other by their interdigital, their preorbital glands, to where, like, all I can say is humans must stink super bad to a deer. Like, because even deer that, like, aren't used to humans, when they smell it, they, like, freak out. Like, it's a smell that, like, I don't understand, but they just know it's not right. I mean, even suburban deer, or urban deer that, like, I'll be walking timber in an area where they're going to, do some logging to put houses in or something. And even those deer, know that it's not right. They'll put up with it and they'll stand around and watch you and, but they just know it's not right. And it's just odd to me how that works. So that's why I say I think people need to be extra careful about, like, I pee from a tree stand. It doesn't bother me. It doesn't bother the deer. I don't want to do it every 20 minutes all day long for a week straight in the same spot. Then I think that would be alarming. But, your urine is filtered through your kidneys. And, unless you've been drinking, like, really stinky stuff like coffee, like bad coffee or, that can have a different odor to it. But, like, if you drink a lot of water and clean stuff, I don't think it's a big deal. So I guess what I'm saying is like, that's why the lotion is so important to me, in the private parts, everywhere on my body, I use the lotion because I think it, like, gives me that extra layer of protection.
Well, and it's amazing how good those deer's noses are. You know, I can remember a time we were in South Dakota, and we were hunting whitetails and muleys, and we were in this open country, and we were standing on top of this big kind of big ditch or big valley or kind of situation, and there were these deer, and they were 500 yards away, and the wind started to switch, and we had some cover, but we were hunting with a guide, and this is years ago, and we weren't practicing good scent control at this point on this hunt. The wind switched, and those deer started to get directly downwind. The guide said, "Just watch these deer," and they are far away. And that wind switched, and you could tell as soon as that wind got to a point where they were downwind and it hit them, it was like boom. First one nose up, second one nose up, and then within a minute they were gone off the other way. And it was just amazing to see like how far away those deer were and how quickly, you know, that wind switched. And when they got us and they were gone. You know, so to your point that we must stink the deer, I mean, yeah, you're right. We must, and they can pin you. I think we don't realize that, you know, as hunters, sometimes if you're not practicing good scent control, I mean, just because you didn't get blown at or you didn't, you know, get physically busted right there, doesn't mean you didn't get busted. You know, whether it's in your tree or on your way to the tree, you know, that's why you got to pay attention to the wind on your access too. And just your scent control in general, because it's tough to beat their nose. You know?
Out of curiosity, was that a group of mule deer or whitetails?
Whitetails.
Is there a difference? Because I've never really hunted mule deer. I killed one years ago with my buddy Jared, but we were rifle hunting. We was out of blind, and I mean, they were walking up a valley, and you know, they were fairly close, but not super close. But do they react to human scent like whitetails?
Yeah, I think that they do. You know, I don't have as much experience hunting mule deer as whitetails, obviously. I mean, I've shot one, filmed them a bunch, and, you know, the key is there. And, you know, when you're Western hunting like that, it's more difficult to have good scent control because you're usually putting on a lot of miles, especially if you're hunting with a guide. Like a lot of those people out there,
you're not just sitting in a tree stand.
Yeah, they don't practice good scent control. Now, I'm not saying everybody, but it's just harder to do that, right? So, you know, you're religiously playing the wind, I feel like, when you're hunting in those situations. But I can tell you when the wind is, you know, at your disadvantage, like you're toast. And it's the same with elk hunting. It's the same with, you know, mule deer hunting. So I would imagine that it's pretty similar. I don't know that there's any huge difference, like they smell better or worse.
I was just curious because we had a guy comment. What did he say, Dylan, on our post about mule deer or whitetail? Yeah, something about whitetails are so easy, you know. And I just, you know, I was like, wow, I mustn't hunt the whitetails I hunt, or I'm a sucky hunter. But, you know, I just curious if they were, because like I remember when we were out in Colorado, we were driving around and we were looking, you know, I was seeing 180-inch mule deer 40 yards off the road standing there looking at you like a cow, you know, like it was no big deal. Whitetail would never do that.
I think it's all relative, you know. I mean, you look at how many people go and spot and stock whitetails. Not very many, you know, there's a handful. But like there's a lot of people that are out there spotting and stalking mule deer. So, you know, a lot of that has difference in terrain. And I think still it goes to the point, like all mule deer are different too. Like they put up with different things and it's where they're at.
I can tell you, I'd like to try it.
I
mean, I watched like those hunts with like Cody Robinson and my goodness, those are some giant mule deers. I mean, like I could see me getting into that, and I could see why they're ate up with it. I highly doubt they're any easier or dumber than a whitetail. I think in their own world, but I'm just saying, like, I was just curious if there was a defined difference in them. But you're probably correct in the saying that most of those Westerners don't do as much scent control because they are moving so much, and it's a spot and stock trying to keep the wind in their favor to begin with, so it's not as big of a deal.
Right. And I will say, JJ, before you go, like, I grew up in, you know, Southwest Pennsylvania, right? Like grew up hunting whitetails and like that was my thing, and never could understand for the life of me why anybody would want to hunt anything else. Like, you know, to your point, I don't know if it was this podcast or the one before, but you know, like you can't understand that because you have such a passion for hunting whitetails. And then I started filming, you know, different big game species and, you know, started filming some elk hunts and started filming these mule deer hunts. And I'm like, I could never get in the mule deer thing. And then I started filming these spot and stock hunts and I'm like, man, this is freaking awesome. And then I finally went and did it for myself, went to Alberta and did the whole Love Dad film. I haven't been back since, but definitely on the bucket list to go again because it is addicting.
Yeah.
Like the spot and stock feature with a bow, like that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I'd like to try that.
Yeah, I was just going to add in, when I did my first Western hunt, it was just a game changer on understanding thermals. Like, it's such a drastic change when like a morning thermal flips in the mountains compared to, just a rolling hill here, and you take that information back, like it just started to click. So when I got back here, I'm like, oh, that makes so much more sense how, even though we got smaller hills, the way that the temperatures are pulling that wind up and down just small hills even, it's crazy. So it really makes you click. So if nothing else, go out there and don't get addicted to it. But, the learning you can do from the thermals and mountains is crazy.
Yeah.
It's so drastic.
Yeah, I think there's a huge, that's like, there's these social media guys, that I see on there that, I'm trying to think of some right off the bat, but that, are known for killing big white or, mule deers and coos deers and, the Western type stuff and elk, and they're all pros in their own. It's like a totally different world that I would not be used to, and so like they're masters of their craft, and I'm sure by looking at some of the animals they kill, it isn't easy.
No, and it's interesting. Like you're a big, advocate of like, you need a big deer to kill one. It's kind of the same there, but it's different. Like these guys are killing big mule deer and like, they got to find them now. It's a different way to find them. They're doing so much more glassing from a distance. And that's a whole art in itself. It's just being able to sit on a hillside and glass massive amounts of open stuff. And pick these deer off and try to navigate that. It's a whole different world. That's what makes it cool too, is just that difference in the way that you hunt them. I guess that's what's addicting about it too. So,
and I think like where I was in Colorado, where I saw those big mule deers along the road, that was down in the valleys by the ranches. And I guess those deer were probably more used to the traffic and the people, and maybe they weren't getting hunted as much because they were on those private type ranches as we were driving through there, compared to when you get into the mountains. Maybe it's different, just like whitetails possibly.
Well, just think of the whitetail a city deer staring at you in someone's backyard versus
compared to at your farm where he's like, oh, there's a poacher.
Yeah. Well, let's take this scent control game one step further, especially when it comes to whitetail hunting, like clothing wise. So Ben, like, what's your approach to, cleansing your clothing beforehand? And then how often are you, rewashing your clothes throughout the season and doing some scent control maintenance on your clothing and your gear?
Well, so I think it just depends on what kind of clothing you're using. If you're a carbon clothing garment wearer, there's special directions for that. You don't want to sway from that too much, I don't think, on how you use those garments and how they take special care. But like, typically, the clothes I've been wearing, aren't carbon. But I also believe there's certain fabrics. If you ever notice, there's some fabrics that just have a smell no matter what you freaking do with them.
Well, it's essentially plastic, a lot of those polyesters.
It's like you can put them in a container with leaves or dirt or whatever, and you still pull them out and they still have that smell. So it's like it's trying to narrow yourself down to find those certain clothes. And, for me, it's hard because like when you have a clothing sponsor now, you just hope that clothing is that clothing that doesn't do that. And, we're now switching to Osseo gear, and you wore it last year. We're excited to get it this year because, they're actually making it in a mossy oak Terra Gila pattern for us to wear. So we're like super stoked about that. And we've seen some pictures of the garments and we're like jacked. From what I've seen of it, like you brought yours in today for me to look at, I don't think it's that material. I think it's the right kind of material. There's certain shirts and things that hold odor that no matter what you do with them, they're going to smell the same no matter what. But one thing that I think a lot of people make a mistake in is they'll wash their hunting clothes in their wife's washing machine. Where she's washed it with regular detergent, for her kids or whatever all the time. That's a big no-no. I we have one washer and dryer that's at another house that is solely for hunting. It's where some hunters stay with us, and it's on the machine. You cannot put scented soap in it. Same with my house in Illinois, that we use for hunting out there. That washer and dryer was bought for hunting, no scented, nothing. But a lot of times I'll just wash them in a tub, like plastic tote container you would get from Walmart, like a storage container. I'll just fill it with water, and I'll use the phase detergent, and I'll hand wash them, and just do them real good, and then rinse, dump that water out, put fresh water in, do it again, dump it out, and then soak them, pull them out, let them air dry. That's kind of how I do my clothes. And then there's been times like last year with Roman, there's been times where I'll actually smoke my clothes a little bit. Like literally light a pile of leaves on fire and just kind of like stand around and let that smoke get on me. And then I'll go hunt. It worked on him. Some deer it doesn't work on. I know the Wenzels are big on smoking their clothes. I wanted to try it because I was getting nailed a little bit, and that it was a lot of wet weather right then. And I was getting nailed by some does downwind. And I'm like, what the heck is going on? Now they're smart does. They're cagey. They get hunted a lot right there in that neighborhood. A lot of hunters right there. And so I tried it, and it actually worked. Like it was something different for them. Like they were used to, smelling smoke from people's fires or people burning trash or just, it's kind of a common scent. And I got to think it could be the one thing and it happened to work in that situation. I tried it in Illinois. It didn't work. So I went back to my normal thing and it worked. I remember going hunting. I used to hunt all the time right after work, logging all day. Didn't have time to go home and shower or whatever. And it was before I was filming. Always carried my bow in my truck and basically would just put camo on, and my hands, everything still smelled like diesel fuel and chainsaw gas. But in our area of Ohio, there's a lot of gas wells and oil, gas and oil wells and, pumpers and the motors running all the time, and that kind of that natural gas smell, and farmers. And it was amazing. Like sometimes I think you'd almost be better off to smell like that in some of those areas than you would to try to clean up, because it didn't set them off at all. So, but
yeah, I think you got to figure out what your deer see as danger, and then kind of adjust that. Whether you're hunting the city and people are walking, there's plenty of scenarios we've broken down where people are walking their dog every night on the trails, on the smelling that versus a logging operation or whatever it may be. So like figuring out that situation, removing the danger element is what we always think is the best, whatever that means. Obviously, the human odor seems to be danger in most cases, but figuring out what works for that situation, driving tractors in, driving a four-wheeler in, or maybe you follow the landowner walking her dog and you jump in, just figuring that out, playing with that scenario and matching, and try not to, put that danger element out there for the deer is huge.
And I think too, like with human odor, it's food that you eat. A buddy of mine, LW, Miller, he's actually Dale Earnhardt's brother-in-law. He taught me this one, and I don't do it as much as I tried it for a while, but I had a hard time stomaching him. But he eats alfalfa pellets.
I eat a lot of apples in the fall.
He gets alfalfa pellets, and like alfalfa pellets are known to like clean your system. But Kelly and LW are really big, even in their family life, all year round. They don't use any man-made chemically soaps or anything in general. Like Kelly's real big about just the natural stuff that doesn't really have odors, because like she doesn't want those bad things on her kid's skin and stuff like that. So LW is very big about not having, he doesn't smell anyways like a human half the time because he's always that way. But I try not to eat onions. Once I'm starting to hunt, I don't eat onions, stuff, garlic, stuff like that. No way. Kind of watch what I drink as far as like, I try not to drink coffee too much in the mornings before I go, but I'm a coffee nut, so I still kind of do. But
asparagus.
Yeah, I think your breath can really play a big part in it. So yeah, I mean, it's everybody's just got to kind of develop their own niche, but like I know I don't know the guy, but I've seen some things, and I think it's John Eberhard or something. He's a public land hunter guy from Michigan. He's killed a lot of Pope and Young type deer. He's really big about like the scent lock, how he carries them, and I watched his thing. It was good. It works for him. I think everybody can use a little bit of everybody's thing and adapt to that. But I thought his story was cool because like he drives a minivan and that's what he hunts out of, and he's got different totes. He dresses in his van, and he's got his own system, and he's hunting tough deer, and it works for him. So I think everybody just needs to kind of develop that, but just always take it serious. Don't slack on it, because I think that is how many deer you probably had in your roundhouse and you just didn't even ever know it, or were headed your way and you never knew it because they smelled you.
Yeah, what have you seen over the years? It seems like every big buck I've ever seen that crosses that downwind path and picks up the human odor, they get out of there quietly.
Yeah,
they may be fast, but it's quiet.
Yeah, they don't blow.
Yeah,
they don't. They just leave.
And you may hear them.
You'll get the old hodo that'll stand down there and blow and carry on and make you irritated, and
So, and if you're hunting one buck and you're there to shoot that one buck or nothing, I mean, you got to be pretty careful, because if he silently got downwind and you picked you up, your scent control was poor. You're hunting the next 7 days for no reason.
And I will tell you this too,
Waste
where
of time.
a lot of people make a big mistake is a deer busts them, and so then they start instantly trying to do whatever they can to make that deer come to them or calm down. They start calling or rattling. Well, maybe he didn't know it was me. That is the worst thing you can do. Best thing you can do at that point is get out of your stand and talk like you're the farmer and leave. Just act like you're a timber forester, be just like, oh, hey, just whatever. I'm just here trying to kill you, but you got me, so I'm leaving. And
I've heard that in the woods. Some guy.
Just act like you're not a threat. I'm telling you, it'll work. Like, he ain't going to be there that night, but I'm just telling you, he's going to hear that, and he's going to stop on the next ridge or wherever he's at, and he's going to just listen to you the whole time. And I'm serious. I mean, talk the whole way out. Like you're talking to your buddy marking timber or looking for a property corner or something. Like you're not a threat, and just leave.
Would you do that on a buck that you walked up on going to your stand? Because last year I walked up on one of the bucks I was looking to shoot, but kind of borderline, and I saw him jump up and run away, and I was being quiet. Should I have yelled at him? Well,
you don't necessarily yell at him, but I'm just saying, like, then you just kind of act like that lady walking the dog. Like,
and I was next to a road.
Yeah,
like he was watching people.
Exactly. Then that's a perfect scenario to be that non-intrusive, I'm not here to kill you type person. You think about it, like Joe the farmer bangs the gates, rides the tractor, goes, does whatever they want to do, and those deer never leave. They might go back into the woods, but they're not scared. I mean, I see it on my own farm. Drive my tractor around, as long as I don't stop, like I can be on a four-wheeler or whatever, blow right by those deer down in the timber. If I don't stop, pay attention to them, they're fine, because they can hear me. They know where I'm at. But the second you stop or you get quiet or you start sneaking and little sticks cracking, that's what freaks them out. Now, I'm not saying make all that noise going to your stand every time, because I still think you need to be stealthy. I'm just saying, and there's certain situations, like I think it's okay to be noisy, like hanging stands, or just do it normal. Just be like you're out there enjoying your property, or you're the neighbor looking for his dog type thing, and bang around, get it done, and get out. Run a chainsaw, Like trimming stands. I used to be like a freak about it. I'd never run a chainsaw around my tree stands. Then I'm like, what am I talking about? I cut down trees, come back in the next day on my logging roads on my jobs, and it's covered with deer tracks. They don't care. So you're almost better off to make that kind of like non-intrusive scent, or non-threatening scent, I guess.
Yeah, the other day we were mowing and spraying plots, and then set up a camera, and one of the first bucks on there was like the biggest buck in that area. Hours after we left, but he saw the disturbance. He said, "Oh, this field's been mowed, and all these trees were moved, and these stumps were pulled out." It wasn't just like, "Well, there's a little bit of human odor on this scrape. I better sneak back out."
They associate human odor with that, I feel. Like, I really do. I feel they expect it at this point. Like, you know, oh, there's the humans, you know, like that, all that noise, all that. They know it's humans, you know, they know it's not right, but it's that sneaky being around, like sneaking in. That's why, like, these e-bikes, they're awesome to use, or like, you know, the old electric UTVs and stuff. But when you come up on a deer on one of those, dude, they freaking lose their mind because they didn't hear you coming. And so when you come up on them, they're like, you know, gone, like just freaking out. Same with turkeys, you know, to where like if they heard you coming, he might just slip off to the edge and just stand down in there and let you get by and go do your thing. Now, granted, like in open areas, you know, trying to get and check cameras, they're just great for. But I'm just saying, they don't like that surprise, you know.
Yeah, I can see that for sure. Back to, you were cleaning your gear, hanging it on the line, kind of keeping that natural scent control. What about gear, like your boots? I know that we've covered that pretty heavy in the past. What about, you know, cleaning your boots and your feet and your legs and any other gear? Like, what's your process of cleansing that preseason? Do you do it multiple times in the season? Does it sit outside? Like, what's your process?
I mean, I basically just don't let things get in the house. I mean, I'll leave my boots sit on the porch or wherever. I don't wear them to pump gas. I'll wear them to, you know, through the woods maybe a time or two just to get that, like before, if they're brand new, you know, wear them scouting or something. But then again, I also feel like you get that sweaty from your, you know, human sweat. My feet sweat a lot. So a boot dryer is a big thing for me. I got to have a boot dryer. And, you know, I'll try to keep them dry. But just basically airing out, or once I clean my boots and I put them in those totes themselves, and I try to keep everything in those plastic totes that the top snap on. You know, it's just simple and easy. You know, ScentLock even makes a tote that's convenient. It's not necessarily carbon, but it's just a convenient little tote that everything can pack in nice and, you know, get around. But I think even like with Osseo gear, I don't think it's a dumb idea to wear like a carbon, you know, like ScentLock and then make like carbon shirts, you know, like a long sleeve. I think that's not a bad thing, you know, because I do believe carbon works, personally.
A base layer system.
Yeah, I do believe it works.
Well, whatever you're doing is working. Keep shooting 3 booners a year, so.
You know, like you were talking about, you know, I remember back when, you know, I was just sitting there like, man, if I could just shoot 180, I'm over here like, man, thinking that exact same thing right now. If I could just shoot 180.
I thought you shot one a couple years ago.
It wasn't quite 180.
He was 70s though, wasn't he?
Right at 70, yeah. So I'm not complaining. I'm just thinking about, man, what would it be like to be Ben Rising?
Here, I bless you, my son.
Calling my shot this year, 180, here I come.
It is. But no, I mean, dude, I don't even know how to explain it because people say the same thing to me all the time. And I mean, I don't know. I guess it kind of really hit me last year too, because like I visited some people that were in the industry, you know, and I'd watched a lot of these deer on TV and, you know, like how big they were, what they supposedly were scoring and type thing, you know, and I go into there and see these deer, you know, and I'm like, nice, you know, nice deer, whatever. And was, you know, glad to see it all. And then I go home and walk in my living room and I'm just like, dang, man, like, really? Like, I couldn't believe it. Like, it actually hit me then. I was like, these are some big animals, you know? And so I don't know, I just very blessed. I thank God that I have that ability, and how long it'll last, I don't know. I mean, it could end tomorrow. I may go this year and never shoot a deer. I hope that's not the case. I hope it, you know, keeps blessing me and I can still get on deer and have the health to do it. You know, I try to be very humble about it. I try to be helpful to other people, and, you know, except Dylan, I'm trying to teach Dylan to do it on his own. So, but he's going to get there.
Well, you've definitely had a lot of success, and there's a lot of reason, a lot of factors behind that success. And again, we appreciate you coming on and sharing your knowledge. Always happy to chat with you and break down your hunts, because it's always exciting, always a motivator for us and everybody that watches and listens. So we appreciate it. Guys, we're out of time. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure you subscribe, download the free Deer Society app. Check out Ben's hunting content on Whitetail Edge and Deer Society hunt breakdowns. Lots of good stuff coming here this fall. Make sure you keep up with us on social. Hopefully some big bucks fall in here before you know it this fall. So thanks for listening. Ben, thanks. And we'll catch you guys next time.
Well, I'm a deer hunting man. Well, I'm a deer hunting man.
The Deer Society's success has been built on great partnerships with great product makers, such as Illusion Systems, maker of the Extinguisher Deer Call, the Black Rack Rattling System, and the Phase Body Odor System, Tacticam and Reveal, Osseo Gear, 10-Point Crossbows, Burris Optics, Huyman, and Big Frig.